The click of my heels echoed through the marble foyer as I stepped into my home, the scent of success clinging to me like expensive perfume. Another day, another deal closed. I was riding high on the wave of my latest business triumph, ready to celebrate with a glass of Chardonnay and a long hot bath. But as I rounded the corner into my living room, my world tilted on its axis. "Hello, Emma." The deep, familiar voice sent a chill down my spine. There, lounging on my cream leather sofa as if he owned the place, sat Ethan, my ex-husband, the man I'd thought I'd never have to see again. I froze, my hand still on the light switch. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ethan's lips curled into that infuriating smirk I used to find so charming. Now, it just made my blood boil. "Now, is that any way to greet your former better half?" "It is when said better half breaks into my house," I snapped, dropping my briefcase and crossing my arms. "I'll ask you one more time. What are you doing here?" Ethan stood, his tall frame unfolding like a predator ready to pounce. "I'm here to discuss the house, actually. Alice and I want to move in." The name hit me like a slap. Alice, my sister. The woman Ethan had left me for. "You've got to be kidding me." "I assure you, I'm not." Ethan's eyes gleamed with a hint of malice. "We figure it's only fair. After all, you couldn't give me what I wanted. What was the point of this big, beautiful house if it was never going to be filled with the pitter-patter of little feet?" My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. "Get out!" I hissed. "Come on, Emma. Be reasonable. You're obviously doing well for yourself." He gestured to my designer suit. "Surely you can afford to move somewhere more suitable for a single, childless woman?" The words stung more than I cared to admit. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I said, "Get out. Now, before I call the police." Ethan held up his hands in mock surrender. All right. No need to get nasty. We'll discuss this another time, when you're feeling more cooperative." He sauntered towards the door, pausing as he passed me. "You know, Emma, this stubbornness of yours is exactly why things didn't work out between us. Well, that and your shortcomings." As the door slammed behind him, I sagged against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. The nerve of that man, the absolute gall. To show up here in my home, demanding I give it up for him and my traitor of a sister. And those cruel jabs about my supposed infertility. I pushed myself upright, fury replacing shock. Oh, Ethan had no idea what he'd just started. If he thought I was going to roll over and let him and Alice take what was mine, he had another thing coming. I stalked to my home office, yanking open the bottom drawer of my desk. There, nestled among old files and forgotten paperwork, was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out, running my fingers over the embossed logo of my lawyer's firm. Inside were the deed to the house, ironclad and in my name alone, along with other documents I'd hoped never to need. But Ethan had forced my hand. As I spread the papers across my desk, a grim smile spread across my face. Let the games begin, I thought. "You want a war, Ethan? I'll give you a war, and this time I won't lose." I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as Ethan's words echoed in my head. By morning, I was a bundle of nerves and determination. I needed to act fast. My first stop, my lawyer's office. "Emma, what a surprise," Richard said, ushering me into his plush office. "What brings you here so early?" I slapped the manila folder on his desk. "Ethan's back, and he wants the house." Richard's eyebrows shot up. "I see. Well, let's take a look, shall we?" As he pored over the documents, I paced the room, my mind racing. How dare Ethan think he could waltz back into my life and demand anything? And with Alice, of all people? "Well, Emma," Richard's voice snapped me back to attention. "I have good news and bad news." I braced myself. "Give it to me straight." "The good news is, the house is legally yours. Ethan has no claim to it whatsoever." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "And the bad news?" Richard's face grew serious. "The bad news is, if Ethan's willing to try this, he might not stop here. We need to be prepared for other potential attacks." My stomach churned. "What kind of attacks? Financial, legal, personal? It's hard to say. But given your history, and the fact that he's involved with your sister, things could get messy." I sank into a chair, suddenly feeling every bit of my age. "God, Richard, how did I get here?" His eyes softened. "Emma, may I speak frankly?" I nodded, bracing myself. "You're one of the strongest women I know. You built an empire from nothing after Ethan left you. Don't let him shake you now. His words hit home, and I felt a spark of my old fire returning. You're right. I've worked too hard to let him take anything from me now. As I left Richard's office, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Café Noir, 1 p.m., Alice. My sister, the betrayer. My hand shook as I typed a reply. Fine. The cafe was bustling when I arrived, but I spotted Alice immediately. She hadn't changed much, still beautiful, still with that air of innocence that had always driven me crazy. Emma, she said, standing as I approached. Thank you for coming. I sat down, not bothering with pleasantries. What do you want, Alice? She flinched at my tone. I wanted to explain. About Ethan. About the house. There's nothing to explain. I cut her off. You betrayed me. Both of you did, and now you have the audacity to demand my home. It's not like that, Alice pleaded. Ethan, he's not well, Emma. He's desperate. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Not my problem. But it is. Alice's voice rose, drawing stares from nearby tables. She lowered it to a whisper. He's dying, Emma. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What? Cancer. Stage 4. He wanted to make things right before. She trailed off, tears in her eyes. For a moment, just a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered all the pain, all the sleepless nights, all the tears I'd shed because of them. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice steady. But it doesn't change anything. The house is mine. End of story. I stood to leave, but Alice grabbed my arm. Please, Emma, for old time's sake, for family. I yanked my arm away, fury rising in my chest. Family? You gave up the right to call me family when you slept with my husband. As I stormed out of the cafe, my phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Ethan. I know Alice told you. Please, Emma, I need to see you. One last time. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. What should I do? The rational part of me said to ignore it, to protect myself. But another part, a part I thought long dead, whispered of closure, of answers long overdue. With a deep breath, I made my decision and began to type. I sat in my car, staring at the familiar facade of the diner where Ethan and I had our first date. My fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as memories flooded back, unbidden and unwelcome. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked inside. The bell above the door chimed, just as it had all those years ago. Ethan was already there, hunched over a cup of coffee. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. When he raised his eyes to meet mine, I saw a flicker of the man I once loved. Emma, he said, his voice rough. Thank you for coming. I slid into the booth across from him, my guard up. You said you wanted to talk, so talk. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm dying, Emma. I don't have much time left, and I want to make things right. Make things right? I scoffed. You think you can undo years of pain and betrayal with one conversation? No, of course not, he said quickly, but I thought maybe we could start with the truth. I leaned back, crossing my arms. The truth? That's rich, coming from you. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. I know, I've been a coward, but please, Emma, let me explain. Against my better judgment, I nodded. When we were together, I was scared of commitment, scared of the future. And when we couldn't conceive, I used it as an excuse. I blamed you because it was easier than facing my own fears. I felt a lump forming in my throat. And Alice? Ethan looked down, shame etched on his face. Alice was a mistake, a terrible, unforgivable mistake. She was there, she was easy, and I was weak. You broke my heart, I whispered, surprised by the raw emotion in my voice. I know, Ethan said, reaching across the table. I pulled my hand away before he could touch it. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life, which, as it turns out, isn't very long. I felt a pang of sympathy, quickly squashed by years of hurt. What do you want from me, Ethan? Forgiveness? Absolution? He shook his head. No, I don't deserve either of those things. I wanted you to know the truth, and I wanted to apologize for everything. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. The house, I said finally. Why now? Ethan's face crumpled. It's not for me. It's for Alice. I wanted to leave her something, some security. I felt a flash of anger. So you thought you'd take it from me again? I wasn't thinking straight, Ethan admitted. I was desperate. But I see now how wrong I was. The house is yours, Emma. It always should have been. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Everything okay? Lucy's asking for you. Reality crashed back in. My husband, my daughter, my life now. I stood abruptly. I have to go. Ethan looked up, a mix of sadness and understanding in his eyes. Of course. Thank you for listening, Emma. It means more than you know. As I turned to leave, he called out, Emma? I paused, not turning back. I truly am sorry for everything, and I'm glad you found happiness. You deserve it. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and walked out of the diner. As the door closed behind me, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The past was the past. I had a future to focus on. But as I drove home, a nagging thought persisted. If Ethan was telling the truth about his illness, what did that mean for Alice? And more importantly, what did it mean for me? I pulled into my driveway, my mind whirling. As I reached for the door handle, I froze. There, on my front porch, stood Alice. And she wasn't alone. A young boy, no more than 5 or 6, clung to her hand, a boy with Ethan's eyes and my sister's smile. Emma, Alice said, her voice trembling. There's something I need to tell you. I stood frozen, staring at Alice and the boy on my porch. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Emma, please, Alice pleaded. Can we come in? I promise I'll explain everything. Against my better judgment, I nodded and unlocked the door. As they stepped inside, I caught a whiff of Alice's familiar perfume, mixed with the scent of crayons and fruit snacks that seemed to cling to all young children. Who's this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alice took a deep breath. This is Ethan Jr. He's your nephew. The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. My nephew? Yes, Alice said, her eyes brimming with tears. He's 5 years old, and he's the reason I'm here. I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. I don't understand. Why now? Why are you telling me this now? Alice knelt down next to Ethan Jr., smoothing his hair. Sweetie, why don't you go play with your tablet in the living room while Mommy talks to Aunt Emma? The boy nodded and scampered off, leaving Alice and me alone in the kitchen. Emma, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, Alice began. But with Ethan, with his condition, I'm scared. I don't know how I'm going to take care of EJ on my own. I felt a surge of anger. So what, you thought you'd come here and use your son to manipulate me? To get the house? No, Alice cried. That's not it at all. I need your help, Emma. You're the only family we have left. I laughed bitterly. Family? You destroyed our family when you slept with my husband. I know, Alice whispered, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But please, Emma, this isn't about me. It's about EJ. He's innocent in all of this. I stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of curiosity about the nephew I never knew I had. Why didn't you tell me before? I demanded. 5 years, Alice. You kept this from me for 5 years. Alice hung her head. I was ashamed and scared. Ethan, he didn't want anyone to know. He said it would complicate things. Complicate things? I scoffed. As if they weren't complicated enough already. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. On my way home with Lucy. Everything okay? Reality came crashing back. My husband, my daughter, my life now. How could I explain this to them? You need to leave, I said, my voice shaking. I can't deal with this right now. Alice stood, her eyes pleading. Emma, please. I know I have no right to ask, but... You're right, I cut her off. You don't have any right to ask, not after everything you've done. As if on cue, Ethan Jr. came bounding back into the kitchen. Mommy, can we go home now? I'm hungry. I looked at the boy, really looked at him for the first time. He had Ethan's eyes, but Alice's smile, and something else, something that reminded me of myself at that age. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. Wait, I said, just as Alice was gathering her things. I need time to process all this, but I can't just turn my back on family, even if that family has hurt me. Alice's eyes widened with hope. What are you saying? I took a deep breath. I'm saying, let's talk, really talk, about everything, and then we'll figure out where to go from there. As Alice nodded, tears streaming down her face, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Mark and Lucy were home. I steeled myself for what was sure to be the most difficult conversation of my life. But as I looked at Ethan Jr.'s innocent face, I knew I had to try. For his sake, if nothing else. Come on, I said, gesturing to the living room. We have a lot to discuss. The days following Alice's revelation blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and tense conversations. Mark was understanding, if not a little shocked, but Lucy was too young to fully grasp the situation. I found myself torn between my past and present, struggling to reconcile the two. One particularly grueling day at work, I sat in my office, staring blankly at my computer screen. The numbers on the quarterly report swam before my eyes, refusing to make sense. A knock on my door jolted me back to reality. "Come in," I called, straightening up. My assistant Sarah poked her head in. "Miss Thompson, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." My heart skipped a beat. "Who is it?" "He says his name is Ethan." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Send him in," I heard myself say, even as my mind screamed in protest. Ethan walked in, looking even more haggard than the last time I'd seen him. The cancer was taking its toll. "Emma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What do you want, Ethan?" He sat down heavily, his eyes never leaving mine. "I know Alice told you about EJ. I wanted to explain." "Explain?" I scoffed. "Explain how you kept my nephew a secret for 5 years, how you're trying to use him to manipulate me now." Ethan flinched. "It's not like that. I made mistakes, Emma, terrible mistakes, but EJ, he's innocent in all this." "So I've been told," I said coldly. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Ethan continued. "I know I don't deserve it, but I am asking you to consider helping Alice and EJ after I'm gone." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Why should I?" "Because despite everything, you're a good person, Emma. Better than I ever was." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "And because I have something to offer in return." My eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. "This is the deed to my family's vacation property in the mountains. It's worth a considerable amount. I want you to have it." I stared at the paper, my mind reeling. "Why?" "Consider it restitution," Ethan said. "For everything I put you through. Use it, sell it, do whatever you want with it. But please, just consider helping Alice and EJ." As I reached for the document, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Emergency at Lucy's school. Can you come?" Panic gripped me. "I have to go," I said, standing abruptly. Ethan nodded, rising slowly. "Just think about it, Emma. That's all I ask." I rushed out of the office, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. By the time I reached Lucy's school, I was a mess of anxiety and confusion. The principal met me at the door. "Miss Thompson, thank you for coming so quickly." "What happened? Is Lucy okay?" I demanded. "She's fine, but there was an incident. Lucy got into a fight with another student." I blinked in disbelief. "Lucy? My Lucy?" The principal nodded gravely. "She was defending a younger boy who was being bullied. When we asked her why she did it, she said she was protecting her cousin." My world tilted on its axis. How did Lucy know about EJ? As I walked into the principal's office, I saw my daughter sitting there, her chin held high despite the tear tracks on her cheeks. In that moment, looking at her fierce determination, I saw myself. I saw Alice. I saw the strength that ran through our family, despite everything. And I knew what I had to do. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and dialed Alice's number. It was time to face the past and forge a new future, for all of us. The office felt like a pressure cooker, tension thick in the air as I stared down Ethan across my desk. His gaunt face was a stark reminder of his illness, but the fire in his eyes burned as bright as ever. "You can't be serious," I hissed, gripping the edge of my desk to steady myself. "After everything, you have the audacity to come here and demand this?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Emma, please, you have to understand. I'm dying. I need to know Alice and EJ will be taken care of." "And that's my responsibility, how?" I shot back, fury rising in my chest. "You made your choices, Ethan. You and Alice both." He ran a hand through his thinning hair, frustration etched on his face. "I know I have no right to ask, but—" "You're damn right you don't." I cut him off. "You blamed me for years, Ethan. Made me feel like I was less of a woman because we couldn't have children. And now you want me to take care of your love child?" Ethan's face crumpled. "It wasn't like that. I was scared, Emma. Scared of failing as a father, scared of the future. I lashed out at you because it was easier than facing my own fears." I laughed bitterly. "And that makes it okay. You destroyed our marriage, Ethan. You and Alice both." "I know," he whispered. and I'll regret it for the rest of my life, which as it turns out isn't very long. A pang of sympathy shot through me, quickly squashed by years of pent-up anger. What do you want from me, Ethan? He took a deep breath. I want you to let Alice and EJ move into the house. It's big enough for all of you. You could be a family again. I stared at him, incredulous. A family? Are you out of your mind? I have a family, Ethan. Mark and Lucy are my family now. But EJ is your blood, Emma. Your nephew. Don't you want to know him? The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought of Lucy, fiercely defending her cousin at school, of the little boy with Ethan's eyes and Alice's smile. Despite everything, a part of me did want to know him. But the cost was too high. I can't, I said, my voice breaking. I won't uproot my life, my daughter's life, for this. It's too much, Ethan. His face hardened. Then I'm sorry, Emma, but I have no choice. I'm going to fight you for the house. It's rightfully mine, and I'll prove it in court if I have to. Panic gripped me. You wouldn't dare. Watch me, he growled, standing up. I may not have much time left, but I'll use every second to make sure Alice and EJ are provided for, even if it means taking everything from you. As he stormed out of my office, I collapsed into my chair, my mind reeling. How had it come to this? How had my life spiraled so out of control in just a matter of days? My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Everything okay? You've been at the office late all week. Guilt washed over me. I hadn't told Mark about Ethan's visit, about his threats. I'd been trying to handle it all on my own, just like I always did. But as I stared at the message, I realized I couldn't do this alone anymore. I needed Mark. I needed my family. With shaking hands, I dialed his number. Mark, can you come to the office? There's something I need to tell you. As I waited for him to arrive, I steeled myself for the conversation ahead. Whatever happened next, whatever Ethan threw at us, we'd face it together. Because that's what real family does. And I'd be damned if I let Ethan take that away from me again. The doorbell rang, shattering the fragile peace of our Sunday afternoon. Mark and I exchanged a look of dread. We knew who it was. I'll get it, I said, squeezing Mark's hand. Stay with Lucy. I took a deep breath and opened the door. There stood Ethan and Alice, looking like ghosts from my past come to haunt me. Emma, Ethan began, his voice raspy. We need to talk. I stood my ground, blocking the entrance. There's nothing to talk about, Ethan. I told you at the office, I'm not giving up this house. Alice stepped forward, her eyes pleading. Please, Emma, just hear us out, for EJ's sake. The mention of my nephew sent a pang through my heart, but I steeled myself. You don't get to use that child as a bargaining chip. Mommy? Lucy's voice came from behind me. Who's at the door? I turned to see my daughter standing there, curiosity etched on her face. Mark appeared behind her, his expression a mix of concern and determination. Lucy, honey, go back inside, I said gently, but it was too late. Ethan's eyes widened as he took in the sight of my daughter. You have a child? The shock in his voice ignited a fire in me. Yes, Ethan. I have a daughter, a family, a life that doesn't include you or your drama. Alice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But how? I thought. You thought wrong, I snapped. Both of you did. You blamed me for years, made me feel like less of a woman, and now you have the audacity to come here and demand my home? Mark stepped forward, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. I think it's time for you both to leave. Ethan's face contorted with a mix of emotions. Anger, confusion, and something that looked almost like regret. This changes nothing, Emma. I still have a right to that house, for Alice and EJ. You have no rights here, Mark said, his voice low and dangerous. This is our home, our family. And if you don't leave now, I'll call the police. For a moment, I thought Ethan might lunge at Mark, but then his shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. Emma, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I'm dying. I just want to make things right. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. You can't make this right, Ethan. Some things can't be fixed. Alice stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. What about EJ? He's your family, too. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. My little sister who had once been my best friend. Family doesn't betray each other, Alice. You both made your choices. Now you have to live with them. With that, I closed the door, shutting out the ghosts of my past. I turned to face Mark and Lucy, my real family, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. Mommy? Lucy asked, her voice small. Was that my uncle? I knelt down, pulling her into a hug. It's complicated, sweetheart. But you don't need to worry about it. As I held my daughter, I caught Mark's eye over her shoulder. The love and support I saw there gave me strength. But even as I embraced my family, I couldn't shake the image of Ethan's defeated face, or the thought of the nephew I'd never known. The past and present collided in that moment, leaving me torn between the life I'd built and the family I'd left behind. As night fell, I found myself staring out the window, wondering if I'd made the right choice. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The letter arrived on a crisp autumn morning, its official seal mocking me from the kitchen counter. I knew what it contained before I even opened it, Ethan's final attempt to claim what was never his. Mark found me an hour later, still staring at the unopened envelope. "Emma," he said softly, "whatever it is, we'll face it together." His words gave me the courage to tear it open. As I read, my hands began to shake. "He's suing us," I whispered. "Ethan's suing for the house. He claims it was part of our original divorce settlement." Mark's face hardened. "That's impossible. We have the deed. I know, but—" My voice broke. "He's dying, Mark. This is his last-ditch effort to provide for Alice and EJ. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Emma, it's Sarah. Ethan's old assistant. There's something you need to know. Can we meet?" An hour later, I sat across from Sarah in a quiet cafe, my heart pounding. "Ethan lied," she said without preamble, "about everything." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath. "The affair with Alice, it wasn't what you think. Alice came to the office that day to confront Ethan about his gambling debts. He'd been embezzling company funds to cover them. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I saw them together." "You saw what Ethan wanted you to see," Sarah explained. "He staged it, knowing you'd divorce him. It was his way out, to avoid facing the consequences of his actions." My mind reeled. All these years, the pain, the self-doubt. And Alice. EJ. Sarah's eyes filled with sympathy. Alice agreed to play along to protect the family name. But EJ, Emma, EJ isn't Ethan's son. He's Alice's from a previous relationship. Ethan is sterile. He always was. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Ethan's cruel words about my supposed infertility echoed in my mind, all lies. I left the cafe in a daze, my feet carrying me to the one place I knew I needed to go, Alice's apartment. She opened the door, surprise etched on her face. "Emma, what are you?" "Is it true?" I cut her off. "About Ethan? About EJ?" Alice's face crumpled. In that moment, she wasn't my betrayer. She was my little sister again, scared and vulnerable. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I wanted to tell you so many times, but Ethan..." I pulled her into a fierce hug, years of hurt and anger melting away. "It's okay," I whispered. "It's over now." Later that evening, I sat with Mark and Lucy, explaining everything. Lucy's eyes widened with each revelation. "So, EJ is really my cousin?" she asked. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart, and I think it's time we all got to know him." Mark squeezed my hand. "What about Ethan's lawsuit?" I took a deep breath. I'm going to drop it, all of it. The house, the resentment, the past. It's time to build something new. The next day, I called my lawyer and had him draw up new papers. The house would be put in a trust for EJ's future, with Alice as the trustee. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As I watched Lucy and EJ play in the backyard, their laughter filling the air, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The ghosts of my past no longer haunted me. Instead, I saw the promise of a future, one filled with family, love, and second chances. Ethan's betrayal had nearly broken me, but it had also led me here, to a life richer and more fulfilling than I could have imagined. As I joined Mark on the porch, his arm wrapping around me, I knew that this moment, this family, was worth every tear, every struggle. The sun set on my old life, and I welcomed the dawn of a new chapter, one where forgiveness, compassion, and love